If you struggle to get to the point and want to reduce rambling, this one book will help you change that. Smart Brevity, The Power of Saying More with Less, is a book that helped me understand certain frameworks and techniques that made all my emails, conversations, and presentations look a lot more crisp. They went from looking like this to this. So in this video, we're going to learn how to not ramble, be short but not shallow, and sound effective as opposed to fancy. Let's break down the techniques in the book Smart Brevity. Before we get started, if you're new here, my name is Radeep from Frantically Speaking. We release communications content like this all the time, so hit subscribe if you like this stuff. Now, the main point of this book is very simple. Delete, delete, delete. Whenever you, let's say, write an email, we have to reread it to understand what we can delete from it and what the viewer actually needs to know, essentially boiling down to your most important points. And the main way to do this is super practical, that whenever you have something to say or something to write, just take a second, go through it one more time and ask yourself, what does the reader really need to know? This question helps us to build the brevity muscle. And the more we ask it, the more crisp our communication becomes. So without any sort of deletion, here's what a conversation can look like. The first soccer tournament, the first of our year, will be held in Springfield at the Soccerplex, where our boys will kick off another great year together under Coach Smith and hopefully win our first championship. The boys should arrive at 1 p.m. and bring food, water, etc. But I guess you probably already know that since this is not our first tournament together. Thank you and go Red Dogs. I'm assuming Red Dogs is the name of the team. Now, just by going through this again and asking ourselves, what are the most important points that the reader or listener needs to know, we can understand the rule of deletion a lot better. In this case, by just providing context of what we're speaking about, the time and location, along with maybe a quick cheer, are the only things that a listener needs to know, which helps us to go from this, the first soccer tournament, the first of our year, will be held in Springfield at the Soccerplex, where our boys will kick off another great year together under Coach Smith and hopefully win our first championship. The boys should arrive at 1 p.m. and bring food, water, etc. But I guess you probably already know that since this is not our first tournament together. Thank you and go Red Dogs to this. The first soccer tournament will be held in Springfield at the Soccerplex. The boys should arrive at 1 p.m. Go Red Dogs. But besides rereading it, what are some tools that we can utilize to actually become a lot more concise? There are 3 techniques over here that the authors provide. And the very first one is to use highlights. Sometimes when we have to speak or write something, we have to be long about it. There is just no other way around it. In those cases, you want to ensure that your formatting is on point. Instead of having a chunky paragraph like this, we break it down using subtitles, boldening texts, and bullet points to make it like this. In fact, this entire book is written in that particular way itself. If you buy the hard copy of this book and you look at different paragraphs, almost every page will have certain bullet points to it. It'll have complete breakdowns to it. And it just makes the entire reading process a lot easier. The easiest thing you can take away from this is to bolden your points. If you have a paragraph, if you can't really break it down, just to bolden the important elements is good enough as well. The second technique is to skip fancy or foggy words. Fancy words are the better vocabulary that we all aspire to use. The authors call this the $10 words. Words that we think make us sound smart, but just make us sound a little over smart. In fact, they've provided us with an entire list over here of different words that we should avoid and instead use the simpler versions. For example, instead of saying didactic, we can say teachy. Instead of saying paradox, we can say puzzle. Instead of saying salient, we can say on point, and so on and so forth. So instead of aiming to expand your vocabulary, aim to expand the right vocabulary and only learn words that you might not know, but most people do know of. And you also want to avoid foggy words, which I am so guilty of using all the time. These are words like could, may, might, and they usually don't tell us anything of what's really happening. The authors say that if you use the word could, almost anything could happen. So instead of being vague or foggy with our language, we can be a lot more direct. This is best applied in situations where we have to be short and punchy. Think of email subject lines as an example. So if an email subject line is some follow-ups for Monday to discuss later today at meeting, we can instead remove the foggy words and just make it 2 important updates. Instead of update on our plans to deal with virus/work from home, we just say new remote work plan. Or finally, instead of saying product sprint recap for us to review some new templates to explore, we can just say sprint recap 7 new templates. The more specific we are, the shorter we can be. And finally, the third element is to use emojis. A lot of us are naturally good with using emojis while texting, but we can apply them in professional settings as well. Now, the problem is emojis are also easy to abuse, but when used sparingly, they can be quite effective as well. Here's a list of useful emojis for the business world from the book itself, which you can sprinkle around in your emails, documents, or Slack messages. So these three techniques can help us to have a little more brevity. But the final test of understanding how to really be concise is to simply ask ourselves after we've put something down, would I read it if I had not written it? If the answer is no, we need to cut more out. Now, the authors do recognize that in some cases, as we discussed earlier, you do need to go deeper. You do need to elaborate and provide extra information. And they've covered for that as well in this chapter, Go Deeper. By the way, in every chapter, if you see, they have a smart brevity count. I don't know if you can see it clearly here, but they've written the number of words and the amount of minutes it'll take for us to finish this particular chapter. It just makes it such a different and fun read. And the easiest way to do this, if you've typed something out and you need to give more resources or more access, you can simply have a note below that says go deeper, hyperlinked to the deeper documents. And a quick secret is that most people won't really click on this go deeper button, but simply having it there, it just shows the thoroughness and consideration on our part. However, these principles mainly apply to situations in your professional life. If you want to understand how to use and have better conversations in your personal life, check out this review we did on a book called Crucial Conversations. You can go deep on it right here.